Thanks, Cody. You know, it's really interesting to be amongst folks who think a lot like you do. And I just came off drill this weekend, and when you're a military commander, you can't believe some of the things that military members will do on a weekend. Um, you can only imagine, and I could sure tell stories. But I know that after a weekend of being with those guys and gals for the weekend and how I handle problems there, occasionally I actually avoid my wife for a day or two so that I get my language readjusted. So I'm just going to tell you to brace X a little bit. If something happens, it ain't my fault. And if the guy on the back is filming me, I'll just ask that he'll edit whichever really bad ones come out. And so as we look at this topic, the one thing that I'll tell you, I recently saw a survey that said the human being in America lies every 10 minutes, tells a lie every 10 minutes. Now, I don't know where they did that survey at. I assume it was at the University of Texas, but I don't know. Certainly wasn't at A&M or Texas Tech, was it, Red Ryder? So we have this challenge about every time you meet or see a new speaker, you know, what is it that I want to take from this? And so my goal today isn't actually to give you hard data. The last speaker really gave you some good data and some things that you're going to really take and apply to your cow herd. Most of what I'm going to talk to you today about is going to deal with things around human behavior. And as we look at where we're going in the industry, we really do a nice job as veterinarians, talk to you about your vaccine program, how you should feed them, what you should do for them. But we really haven't made any progress in some of these really key areas. And so how do we look at the things that we're doing around human behavior to try to address where we're going? Because whether we like it or not, do we understand, and this is a question you have to ask yourself, do we understand the depth and breadth that our industry is in as far as being under attack? Do we really understand that? Because we sure better think about it. So they do market surveys, and about 10 years ago, if you would do a market survey about where people landed on how they viewed beef consumption or animal agriculture, you could count on a percentage of the population being very anti whatever we're doing out here. What do you think that percentage was? What percentage of the American population looked at what we do out here and said, not only no, but hell no? What do you think that 10% was about the number? It was between 8 and 10% that we would live with about 10 years ago. What's the number today based on the latest market research? I hope it never gets to that, but Burger King ain't helping me. It's right around 25 to 30% of the people, when you do these market surveys, that in a 10-year period have transitioned from, we really don't like what you're doing out here. And so what is our response to that? Is our response to go, well, let's make sure that we have all the health parameters correct. Because I got news for you. Those consumers that are looking at our product and deciding against it, they're not looking at it and going, you know, those guys have BVD. I'm not buying their shit. Ain't nobody saying that, okay? They're looking at other things that we've got to pay attention to. And in order to shift around that, we have to look at our own behaviors. And so this idea of detecting normalization of deviance is a big idea. And Kyle introduced it as detecting abnormal normal. The idea here is that when you do something the wrong way long enough, eventually it becomes normal behavior and you don't even know that you're doing it wrong. Does that make sense? So abnormal normal becomes how we do business. And I'm going to tell you, as we think about that, we're doing some things in the industry that we've done forever because that's the way we've always done it. And I would love to say we could keep doing it that way, but if we keep doing it that way, that number is going to continue to grow, and the industry is going to change significantly within every person's life that's in this room. Now, and so how do we detect it? What do we do with it? And again, as I spend time building a military organization, I have to be very concerned about detecting and then breaking abnormal normals. That's really the crux of this talk. Hopefully we'll get it on time. Perry, you know when it's time to pull the plug, just let me know, because I can talk about this all day, and then we miss food, and that's not what we're here for. This is for you folks. This is your meeting to give you something that when you walk out of here and you go back to your operations, it's a value that allows you to be more productive in what it is you're trying to do. So let's walk through that. So my guys and core values. One of the things, back to this idea that people lie about every 10 minutes, one of the ways you get away from that is provide evidence of who you are and what you are. So I could tell you all of these things, Todd, but you don't know who I am or where I'm from, so I'll be very transparent. So these are 4 of my sons that have also gone through the Air Force, 3 of them through the Air Force Academy. The upper left corner is my oldest son, Ben, who just finished his ER residency down in San Antonio, and he is the only intelligent person in that photograph. In the upper right-hand panel is my son, Dan, after he graduated from the academy. And unless you're really good or have good optics on who that is, who he's shaking hands with, I'm hoping that very seriously that isn't going to be a future president. Lower left is my oldest son. I just commissioned him. He's up in Alaska. And then you can't really pick out my youngest son right here, who was there when the football team was recognized for winning the Commander-in-Chief trophy. And I'm pretty proud of that guy, and I really like the guy in the center. So I've been very clear on where my politics are, there's no doubt. If you don't like them, then brace X, because it's not going to be a politically correct next half hour or 45 minutes. Don't expect that to happen. So what am I going to do? Using stories, because stories is how we would really communicate. When we give you lots of data, people reject data in favor of telling a story. So I'm going to try to use as many stories as I can. Not BS, not Brian Williams stories, but real stories, things that have happened to me that will allow you to understand where I think we're going, and human behavior that allows you to look at thoughts and ideas. And so we're going to have this idea of starting with why. Some of you, this may be a new idea, but I would tell you that if you take nothing out of this next half hour, 45 minutes, is to really come out of here knowing why you're doing what you're doing, whatever it is. Okay, why are we raising cattle? Why are we raising beef? Then understanding and detecting this idea of abnormal normal. What are we doing wrong that we've been doing forever? And then maybe get a little bit of time into health and immune resiliency. And again, if I run out of time, wherever we're at, we stop. This photograph was taken in 2003, and that cat belonged to Udi and Qusay Hussein. And they used to ride around with that thing in the front. It was very tame, and it rode around in the front of the vehicle with them. And anybody that's ever heard a cheetah make that kind of roar, it's actually quite intimidating. So they kept it in the front of their automobile, their BMW 720, to intimidate the local populace. And when I came in possession of the cat and brought it into the Baghdad Zoo, it turned out neither of the boys needed it anymore. And so he's alive and well in the Baghdad Zoo, still quite tame, but it can be very intimidating if you've never been around big cats before. So some of the things, some of the resources that would be valuable for you to look at. I don't know if you do books on tape or if you read. I read everything. I try to read between 2 to 3 books a week. I'm a speed reader, so that helps. But these are books that have really impacted me, and if I were to tell anybody to read some books or put them on tape, as far as where we're going, these were the ones that I would tell you to look at. How many of you have seen Simon Sinek's TED Talk? Anybody of you ever seen Simon Sinek's TED Talk? Okay. Simon Sinek's TED Talk is the most viewed TED Talk ever in the history of looking at TED Talks, and it's Start With Why. And then the sleeper book is The Storyteller's Secret, and that Storyteller's Secret basically think about the person who is the most impactful instructor or teacher you ever had. Think about it a minute and come up with a name. So write it down if you want, and then think about what it was about that individual that made him valuable to you. He or she, whoever did it. And almost without fail, the person that comes to mind is someone who is able to communicate to you through the use of a story, okay? Whether it's a relative or whatever. And so what we've lost in this huge information explosion that's happening, you know, we can all pull up our phones and get massive amounts of information. What we've lost is the ability to communicate through stories and personal stories in general. And people that are good at that end up being very good communicators, and they end up controlling a lot of good information. And when you flash up data signals, you end up in a really bad spot. These 2 last books on how to develop teams are from my principal, military mentor, General McChrystal. And I don't have time to go into them. I just put them up there because I think if you think about it, you might really enjoy those books. So start with why. Simon Sinek's idea is this: if at the very center of who you are, you know why you do what you do, then what you do it and how you do it will be better. Anybody doubt that that's the case? If you don't know why you're doing something, excellence doesn't emanate from that. You have to understand why you're doing it. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Colton. What do you do? So what? Ranching? Okay. So when I ask someone what they do, without ever thinking, they're able to answer that question. And they say ranching. And I'm not going to do it to you because it's really, I know that it's tough. When I ask someone why they're doing it, there's often this pause. And so they invert what we should be thinking about. The first thing we should be able to understand is why we do something. And if we understand why we're doing something, what really becomes driven by that why. Okay, it's a very simple idea, but we often don't think about it, and we screw it up pretty frequently. And so I'll give you an example, and hopefully this video will show about this concept. So I'll just let the video play, and it'll be self-explanatory.
The series is called How Do I Know? And a lot of times when people hear the phrase, how do I know, the next thing they say is what? How do I know what? But the key really isn't to know what. The key is to know why. Because when you know your why, you have options on what your what can be. For instance, my why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. My what is stand-up comedy. My what is writing books. My what can be going out with some friends to eat. In fact, another what that has moved me towards my why is a web series that we have out now called Break Time. So every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, you should subscribe to the channel. We do a series called Break Time on YouTube. So 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode. One episode in particular, I'm about to show you a clip to. We were in Winston-Salem. So Break Time, this is how it works. I travel the country, I do stand-up comedy, probably an hour and a half at an event. And in the middle of my show, I'll just sit down and start talking to the audience. And funny just happens. Or I'll meet somebody who's really interesting. So I met this one guy, and he said that he teaches music at a school. I was like, all right, you teach music, can you sing? And then I'm just gonna show you the clip. Check it. So you're a musical director. Cool.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead.
Amazing grace. the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Wow. That bro could sing. You know what I'm saying? All right, all right. Now, once you give me the version, is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick, if you know which version I'm talking about. Just see if that exists. Let me see what you got.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Right now I'm found, was blind, but now I see.
All right, get this. It's so important to us in what we're doing out here.
So here's the thing. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time I asked him to sing, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what has more impact because you're walking in or towards your purpose.
If you get nothing more out of today, think about why you're doing this. Why are you even here this morning? Never heard of me. Could be a complete waste of your time. But if you know why you're doing it, then you can go towards excellence. If your principal goal is to make money in the cattle business, and that's your why, I have no issue with that. Long term is not sustainable anymore. It is no longer sustainable to make this clearly an economic decision, because my why, which I can state quite clearly, is, and you wonder how you match the two, military career and this veterinary career and what I do. National security and military security and food security are absolutely interlinked. You cannot separate them. If this country is going to work, food security has to work. So why do I do what I do? Pretty simple. I really kind of give a crap about the fact that God gave us this ground, and how do we make them work together? So everything that I do marries those two things up together. That's what I'm all about. That's why I do it. And so if you want to be successful, I would tell you straight up, you have to be able to communicate your why when someone asks you. Because when we ask someone what they do and they say ranching, what does that mean to the 25 or 30% of the people that are not necessarily interested in eating beef? When we say ranching, they have this connotation that is not romantic, and we're abusing animals. That's their perception. But when we say why we're doing something, to provide a wholesome product so that we have this interface and this lifestyle and who we are communicated, it's hard for them to find a lot of fault, okay? Where we've fallen down as an industry is we've talked about what we're doing, but we've not really communicated why we're doing it. So come out of here thinking about what that looks like to you. The backfire effect. Anybody ever heard of the backfire effect? Like I said, I'm going to focus on human behavior, not animal behavior. So you're not used to that from veterinarian. You're used to getting, here's your vaccine program, here's your worming program. You're not going to get any of that today, okay? You're going to get human behavior. The backfire effect is pretty simple. Jennifer, you and I are having a discussion, and we decide we're on opposite sides of the spectrum in the discussion. Pick a topic that you're passionate about. Brent, can you help me out here? providing a safe product. And I'm going to tell you that what you're doing is killing cows, okay? And you're going to provide data on providing safe product, and I'm going to say that you're killing cows, and we're going to have this back and forth discussion. At the end of that discussion, and you provide all the data and I provide all the data, has either one of us moved positions? In fact, we have. Where we've moved to is further entrenched in our original position. That's the backfire effect. When you're on core issues completely separated and you have this data exchange, you don't move them closer, you move them farther away. And our networks take advantage of that. So any of you watch cable news network? Anybody ever see like Fox or CNN? Okay, what is the why for Fox or CNN? Why do they exist? Yeah, this is all about entertainment and getting viewership. That's why they exist. Their interest is not providing news. That's not what they're about. Don't confuse that. So when they create this issue, and there's people that they feel strongly about, and so let's just say we all watch Fox, and they want us to keep watching Fox, they'll pick up an issue. What do they do to make sure that you're further entrenched in your position? And you probably don't even pay attention or know that it's happening. Put an opposing view on. What is that opposing view guy meant to do? Yeah, to make you mad and further they know the backfire is going to happen. So they put the opposing view in there for one purpose and one purpose only. You will be a Fox watcher forever, and when Juan Williams comes on, that idiot, but he's actually the genius in this whole process because he's manipulating you towards viewership. That's the only purpose for having him on there. And we sit there and go, Juan Williams, that's an idiot. The guy's a genius, and his whole purpose of being paid is to further entrench us in our position. And then abnormal continues to be normal. And everybody's happy, and everybody gets their viewership. We get manipulated like that all the time, and we're not paying attention to it. All I'm telling you is human behavior can be manipulated if you're not aware of it. And I'm asking you that as this really small remnant of folks that have this really unique, we have to avoid that. And we can't get caught up in divisive discussions and arguments about what we do. Because what will happen if we do? We further entrench the other side. Tell the story and talk to people about why we're doing what we're doing. But don't argue or get into a discussion on the points that they want to be, because you will not do anything to move the opposite side. I watch NCBA do this, and I've watched the dairy industry do this for 20 years, and I'm scratching my head. Don't you understand human behavior? You're not helping, you're making shit worse. And then they wonder why we're where we're at today, okay? So there's a cognitive quirk that we all have that rejects facts and data that contradict our core beliefs, okay? And when presented with facts and data, instead of convincing someone to change, it backfires and further entrenches their original view. That is human behavior. It's been proved and proved time again. This was a really good example of that. Parents that are reluctant to use vaccines as they believe vaccines will harm their children were shown conclusive data that this is okay, that it was safe. After seeing the data, the parents were more committed to not using the vaccine than they were before. Data doesn't change that. So then they took another tack. They brought another group of parents in, and at the end of that seminar, 75% of the people that were committed against vaccines changed their position. What do you think they did in that seminar that led to people changing their position? They told stories, and they told specific stories of how young people lost their lives because they didn't use this technique or use this vaccine. You cannot underestimate the value of that, okay? So how can the backfire effect be overcome? I'm just going to go to the bottom point here, maybe, if I can get it to go. Whoops. Our reasoning brain is less scientific than we think. So all of this science that you think you're getting and you're processing and now you're going to go home and do it, do you know how many years I've tried as a veterinarian to get ranchers to just use routine vaccines or to adjust the procurement process? You know how many years that's been? It's been 20 years, okay? I don't think we've made any real progress, okay? It's easier to say that fact is wrong than my view is wrong. Doggone it, gotta push the right one. Okay, avoid overkill. If one fact is enough, two facts are too many. Replace the leg you removed with a new leg, but most of all, the best persuasive device is a personal story that you can communicate your why, okay? Conceptualization. So here's another problem that we have as we're trying to communicate our story about what it is we do out here. Conceptualization is the ability, and it's a very unique ability that is estimated to be in between 5 and 10% of the American population. And basically what it says is you take multiple ambiguous inputs and then you develop a strategy out of that. Okay? Very unique skill set. Guess what percentage? I already told you the percentage of people that have that skill is about 10%. Unless you do one thing. What do you think it is? Check it within agriculture. Because what happens within agriculture around that skill set? I would estimate the ability to conceptualize and solve problems in an ambiguous multiple inputs exists in almost 100% of the people in this room. Because that's what we love to do. We don't pick agriculture. Agriculture picks us because this very individual, unique skill set is where we like to live. Now, if we were to do, and we do that every day, now let's just say we're going to take and move those of you that have conceptual type skills, and we're going to put you at a bank teller window all day. And you're going to count money all day, and you're going to stay within a very defined limit. How many of you would go, man, I can't wait to do that? Anybody signing up for that? It's not how we're wired. But let me give you another piece of information. Conceptualizers and non-conceptualizers, and for those of you that have been on teams before with someone who is a strong number, stay inside your lane, don't go outside of the lane. When you are on teams and that guy's over here and you're a conceptualizer on this side, how do you feel about that person? We generally don't like them. And they don't like us. The bulk of the American population falls in that non-conceptual category. And then we don't understand them, they don't understand us. So you have to understand this dynamic. We're freaking weird. We're really less than 2% of the population, but we have this skill set that makes us very different. This was a mission in Thailand, and I was brought there because we were doing an amphibious assault on a beach that was using elephants for the logging industry. And they have a problem with a parasite, and they said, well, we really need you to come in there and deworm our elephants so they don't die from this parasite. So I'm thinking, okay, so I bring in a bunch of oral dewormer, and you think about how much oral dewormer you have to give a cow. Now multiply it by a few, and then you're standing there, and I'm trying to squeeze oral dewormer into this elephant. After about the second or third one, he's had enough. He doesn't want to do it anymore. I have a hint for you. If an elephant doesn't want to do it anymore, he don't do it. And there ain't nothing you're going to do about it. Okay, there's not a squeeze chute big enough that we can change that. So then I said, well, wonder if I could use Poron, because we use Poron dewormers. So I poured the center of his back. Anybody ever sat on an elephant before? And right between those shoulder blades, there's this big dip. And so I put a whole bunch of Poron dewormer there. What do you think happened to it? It just sat there. Yeah, because what's a pachyderm? Or thick skin. So this dewormer's sitting there, and I'm thinking, that's not going to work. So I looked out of the corner of my eye, and I watched this young guy up on the elephant using that kind of sharp stick, and he didn't mind that he was up there, that he was using a sharp stick to move him around. I thought, I bet I could get up on that elephant's back and with a large bore needle and a dosing syringe, and he wouldn't care, okay? And so I got up on the elephant. First mistake. Poron dewormer is alcohol-based. If you sit right in the center of it on a hot day, There will be parts of your extremities that will never forget it. So that was my first error. But the second thing I did, where I put that very large bore needle into him, he never budged. No one had ever thought of doing that. And that was done 15 years ago. Today, everybody in Thailand deworms their animals like this. They get up on their back and they inject them. It was a fatal parasite that just because you thought something through, you know, and why hadn't they got there before? You know, the Army'd been working with these guys forever. They hadn't had a full redneck farm boy get up and think about this. Okay, we have this very, very unique skill, but society looks at us like we've lost our friggin' minds, right? So we have to keep that in mind as we go forward. Okay. This is another example of where we're at, folks. How different we really are. You know, why do we have an electoral college? Study finds 16.4 million Americans think chocolate milk comes from brown cows. And that's so ridiculous to us, except that's a real study. Okay? It's like, that's how far we've gotten down the path between what our food supply is and who we are. We have to wrap our arms around that difference. Okay? So, utilize core values and principles. Know your why. You know, integrity first, service before self, excellence in all we do are my Air Force core values. Using passion for our mission. Every one of you have to have gallons of gas. Okay? GAS is a military acronym, and again, you'll have to forgive me, I just got off drill. But GAS is give a shit. Okay? You've got to have a ton of gas. And if you're at the point in your career where you don't have any gas anymore, what are your two options? What are your two options if you're out of gas? You get out or refuel. There's no in between. Okay? You don't have and then so what do you do to burn fuel or refuel or tell your story? And the story has to be both true and scientifically supportable. So as we look at that picture in the lower right-hand corner, what's the picture of? Noah's Ark. So is that depiction of Noah's Ark scientifically supportable? Leave religion out of it, because I absolutely believe the deluge happened and Noah built the ark. Absolutely believe that. But that depiction is not scientifically supportable. Why? 2 male lions. If that were the case, we wouldn't have any more lions unless I'm missing biology. Okay? Great picture, but it can't work, right? So the story has to also be scientifically supportable. Okay? And then, how much time I got, Perry? I got to keep it. 10 minutes?
15.
15? Well, then why you hold up two hands?
That's all I got.
Yeah, well, you need to work on that. So, this idea of teamsmanship, how do you make things work? So we have this massive task in front of us, and everybody talks about this idea of leadership. I detest leadership. Leadership will get you killed and doesn't move the ball forward. I really do not like leadership, and in my unit, when somebody wants to emerge as a leader, I'm very careful of it. But if someone wants to work on a team, then I'm all about that. And all of our society, all we ever talk about is leadership, 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 leadership. Leadership is not what I'm after. I'm after teamsmanship, okay? And we don't think about that. But teamsmanship creates a synergy that you could get no other way. Leadership gets people going multiple different directions. So you got to be very careful. So let's think about this. How much can a draft horse pull? Pounds. Anybody know that number? Anybody work with draft horses? Anybody? Throw a number out for me. How many pounds does a draft horse pull? 2,000 is a pretty good number. Turns out it's a little bit more. We have better draft horses in Colorado. Okay? So the previous speaker said something about no one liked grass more than, what was the person's name?
Kent Mills.
Kent, nobody likes grass. You gotta come to Colorado. There's a whole bunch of people like grass more than you do. So about 8,000 pounds. Now we're gonna take two of them They're untrained, and we're gonna yoke them together. How many pounds can they now pull? Okay? How much? 20. They're untrained, so something happens here. As much as 16, but typically around 12. So 2 untrained together are less than if each one of them were pulling on their own. Anybody ever observed that phenomenon? You know, you got 2 people kind of pulling against each other. Now we're going to change the dynamics, and we're going to go for teamsmanship. We're going to really focus on that. And if you can train a horse, anybody work with horses? Anybody in here work with horses? Between their ears is less than 2 functioning brain cells. It drives me nuts. As a horse vet, you go, some of you really love them. I'm like, if you can train a horse to do this, there's no way you can't train a human being to do this. Okay? How much if they're trained to pull as a team? What do you think the number is? Okay, I like that number, but the math says as much as 32,000 pounds. How in the world can that happen? The math doesn't add up, does it? Okay, so what happens is, and the same thing happens if you've ever played football, basketball, whatever team you've on. So as you train that horse, what happens as the horse strides out? And they have this step right here. They come off the ground and they lose momentum, right? So they lose momentum in that interim period. What does the other horse do if he's trained appropriately? He offsets that pause with his own force, and over time, momentum gets created at a far greater rate that you could possibly generate with each of them individually. That's teamsmanship. So, you know, gentlemen, I would tell you, your wife thinks about this stuff all the time. Okay, guys, the only way we tend to think about it, so I came out of a special forces, special operations environment. We think about that nonstop. You know, what do we need to do as a team to make it better than each of us individually? Okay, all of this applies. It doesn't matter if we're talking about the cattle industry, in your relationships or whatever. If you are very intentional about thinking where that pause is, and then you step in and cover that pause, the things that you can accomplish are much greater if you just think about it. Am I going to try to make SEALs out of you? I mean, as in, you know, Navy SEALs? No, but you don't have to be SEALs. You can just use your brain and go, where's the pause? And where can I step in? It's really quite simple. I told you I was going to stay on human behavior. The 5-hour rule. Anybody know who really wrote the book on the 5-hour rule? So Warren Buffett started the 5-hour rule. The 5-hour rule says he's going to spend at least 5 hours a week in deliberate lifelong learning. 5 hours a week. Any of you have 5 hours a week that you could at least look at something other than being manipulated by Fox News? I find it all the time. So I drove up last night from Colorado and had, I could have turned on Fox Radio because I had Sirius XM, but I put on a book, you know, and so, you know, we have to be very intentional about that. Acquiring diverse, rare, and valuable information from people, information, and experiences, okay? Don't get caught up in your own little world, because the next thing that happens is we get this abnormal, normal behavior. Do any of you have any habits in your life that have become normal, that if someone else were to look at them from the outside in, you'd go, that's really abnormal. You shouldn't be doing it. It doesn't make any sense. Every feed yard, dairy, calf ranch, cow-calf operation that I set foot on as a veterinarian, I find them doing something that is really wrong. And when you point it out to them, they go, I've been doing this forever. Does it make it right? Okay? If you're going to laugh at this video, but this is happening on every single one of your operations with your people every single day. Okay? Maybe I'll get it to go. There it is.
To answer that question, we set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone. simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? After just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone and nobody is watching her, except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do?
What you gonna do?
She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, watch what
Funny.
happens when we introduce
Look in the
another
mirror.
outsider who doesn't know the rules.
For a noon appointment.
Have a seat and they'll be out in just a couple minutes. Thanks so much.
What is it?
Everybody was doing it, so I thought I was supposed to.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do? We kept the cameras rolling as more unsuspecting patients arrived. And slowly but surely, what began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room. Here to explain what's going on in their brains is Jonah Berger of the University of Pennsylvania.
This sort of internalized form of herd behavior is part of what we call social learning. Starting at a very early age, when we see members of our group perform a task, our brains literally reward us for following in their footsteps.
When I saw everybody stand up, I felt like I needed to join them. Otherwise, I'm like excluded. Once I decided to go with it, then I felt much more comfortable.
Conformity is how we become socialized, but it can also cause us to develop bad habits or repeat past wrongs.
And it's why even this rebel, who wasn't standing for any of this nonsense, eventually joined the ranks. And the only thing more shocking than seeing how easily
Our industry is right there right now. We're all standing up to the beep, and we're not even understanding that it's abnormal. What is the bulk of the complaints right now against the beef industry or the dairy industry? Why are consumers not wanting to use our products? Although we're doing pretty good on the beef side, but we're getting pushback. What are their primary complaints? Antibiotics. So the environmental issues, okay? What else? Antibiotic use. Antibiotic use. What's another big one? Animal welfare. So we have these meetings, and what do we talk about at these meetings? Do we talk about how we're going to address those concerns? What's the animal welfare thing that we could do? What would be the most important animal welfare and anti-infective reduction strategy that we could have right now out of this room? If everybody did this, we would significantly decrease that issue. What would it be? Show good stewardship of animals. That's a very broad and correct statement. What would that mean? What would that mean to each one of us? Because I don't know what it means to each one of you. For me, the thing that bothers me is this idea of high-risk cattle. High-risk cattle drive me flipping nuts. Let's get rid of high-risk cattle. You don't have high-risk cattle and your procurement's right and your immune system is right, I don't have an animal abuse problem and my anti-infective dose crashes. I don't need it. We have to think about ways to change what we're doing to take that off the board. If we don't do it, it isn't going to reverse. Okay? So what we do at meetings like this, and that's not what this meeting is, but it drives me nuts over 20 years doing this. That's why I don't work for Merck anymore. I think because they fired me. Was I kept thinking of strategies on how to reduce the use of antibiotics, not how to sell the next dose. What can we do to animals so that we don't need them? That's where we've got to focus. Otherwise, we're standing up at the beep. Okay? So what we do at Diamond V, and I'm going to run out of time, is what can we do to augment what HiPro is also doing around nutrition to give the nutritional benefits so that our animals don't need antibiotics. It's that simple. You know, if you want to get all that information and all that data on how to get there, Perry's here. Perry's Y and my Y match up pretty good. I really don't care, and I don't get incentivized if you buy a Diamond V product or you do anything else. What I do care about, and I want you to make money. Don't misunderstand me. Economics is important because we can't sustain it if we're not financially successful. If we're going to reverse this and sustain what we have here, we got to think about those things that are existential threats. BRD is only an existential threat to us. Respiratory disease is only an existential threat to us if, in fact, we don't figure out how to address animal welfare and anti-infective reduction. We have to begin to look at our operations and what we're doing around those two things, animal welfare, and we won't get them all. Sure would be nice to get down to the 10% rather than the 30% and growing. Okay, any of you watch the Democrat debates? Yeah, no cows, no red meat. Why did they go there? What's that? Yeah, they're getting further entrenched, and again, they're trying to generate folks that are not on our side. How many of you, don't raise your hands, would openly support that position? They know that. Okay? They've already written us off, right? But they've got to generate that information to further entrench their power and their position. Because we ain't going to help them. Absolutely. So how do we combat that? We take away the opportunity to see animal welfare type issues, and we absolutely are intentional about reducing anti-infective use. Okay? Because I can tell you as a veterinarian, they have a point. We use too many antibiotics, period. End of discussion. Animals that are out on a pasture that have no stress on them, how many times you got to go out and treat them? They don't need it. When do they need it? When we bring them in, we put them under stress, we put 11 sale back tags on them, and then you wonder why the damn thing got sick. We've got to stop that. We've got to be very intentional at stopping that. If we don't, the net result is very, very predictable. And all of us are going to be surprised when we go, huh, this industry changed. Shouldn't be surprised. I'll tell you right where we're going if we don't stop what we're doing. Focus on nutrition, focus on cow health, and stop looking for a bottle. Because our consumers, the ultimate people that support what we do, have voted on a 30% and rising basis. They're not going to do it. The dairy industry is suffering way more than the beef industry is right now. Okay? And so people aren't drinking fluid milk. The milk products that they're drinking or they're partaking in, they haven't associated with cows anymore. They drink lattes from Starbucks. They don't even know it's milk, okay? They're drinking pizza cheese or eating pizza cheese. They don't know it's from cows, okay? And they're eating ice cream. They don't make the association. It's the only reason they've stayed, the only reason they've kept their head even partially above water. Okay? It's crazy, but that's where we're at. Okay? The dairy industry has lost fluid milk consumption. And you know that they've lost fluid milk consumption. My own children, when I open their refrigerator, I find this product called almond milk. Anybody ever drank almond milk? Man, I want to shoot myself in the head after drinking that stuff. It's horrible. But their tastes have transitioned to that because they've landed in this very unusual position for most of us in here. That's what we're up against. We either are very intentional about reverting that, or we watch it happen. I know that's doom and gloom, but it's taken advantage of human behavior to invert where we're at today. Diamond V, in partnership with HiPro, has said we can do better. We can provide animal health through proper nutrition, and then put some adjunct management, which is what you guys do around that piece. We can take this to a position that's both economically sustainable, animal welfare supporting, and again, anti-infectives, we don't need them, and we're starting to generate evidence that says, yeah, the crazies are a little bit right, okay? They ain't so crazy. Too many antibiotics does bleed over into human society and put humans at risk. They have proven it. So we either get on board or they're going to tell us. That's all I got. Thank you for your time.